Hey yo, Aaron Mack, BS Detector, back once again, and we are gonna try to finish Tavistock Institute, Social Engineering the Masses. Man, this has been a long journey reading through this book, but how very eye-opening to see and to know that the powers that should not be have been plotting to hijack your mind, your heart, and your soul for at least a century. That's just great, isn't it? Just great. So reassuring. If nothing else, I know that I've plastered my beliefs all over the back of my About Me section or whatever. And some people just find me absolutely intolerable because I don't believe we live on a magical spinny water ball. Or that I believe that most of the Bible, 98, let's say, percent of the Bible already happened. I think Jesus already returned. I don't think he's a liar. I don't think he told some people standing there that they would see him return, and then they just didn't, So don't think Jesus is a liar. Also, don't think the Bible is lying, and people have tried to twist the Old Testament to make it seem, it says circle on the circle of the earth and the face, okay? And people are like, well, your head's kind of a, face. It's like the clock, like a clock. Anyways, the word for that in that Bible verse is circle, not sphere, because there's another Hebrew word called sphere, and I don't even know why we're talking about Hebrew at this point, because I think it's completely, I've got to do more research on that, but as far as I'm concerned at this point, it's totally made up. I mean, the written form of it, sure, it's existed for maybe, I don't know how many 100 years, but the spoken language has only existed for like 100 years, and it's mostly Yiddish using the Aramaic alphabet. So, I mean, that's what it is. And that's the whole thing, too, about these Jays, bro, is they bring nothing but confusion, death, and destruction, just like their father. They are the children of their father, the devil, who has done nothing from the beginning but lie. And that would be Yahweh. So, even if you don't want to, listen to me because you think I'm crazy about that, look into it. Anyways, so the early days is the next heading, and we are still in the science fiction and the Tavistock Institute chapter. H.G. Wells, head of British foreign intelligence during World War I and the spiritual grandfather of the Aquarian conspiracy, was a protege of leading Darwinist T.H. Huxley, founder of the British Round Table Intelligence Organization, along with Cecil Rhodes. The Round Table is one of the open secret societies directly linked to the Black Guelphs, better known as the House of Windsor. Another is the Society of Carpocrates, with its direct links to Queen Elizabeth II, a Black Guelph through her grandmother, Queen Victoria. The most important member of British Round Table was Baron Harold Anthony Coccia, whose family is one of the oldest families in the black nobility. In turn, Venetian black nobility was interlocked with a secret organization, the OC, or the Organizational Council, controlled by the Thule Society, which functioned as the mother organization of a plethora of parties, societies, parliamentary units, and terrorist groups. The greatest creations of the Thule Society were the Nazi Party and its degenerate leader, the Austrian painter. Wells, the novelist, was a member of the elite British oligarchic planning group, the Coefficients. And all of these people were Jays, or crypto Jays, okay? One or the other. Both the Round Table and the Coefficients were committed to the establishment of a, quote, feudal empire run by an aristocracy which controlled all knowledge and technology and used them to rule over a population of ignorant drug plantation slaves, end quote. Well, pretty much there, guys. Okay. The Coefficients were a cross between a diners club and a modern think tank, which met monthly over dinners at London's St. Ermin's Hotel from 1902 to 1908. Along with the members of this group was the powerful Lord Robert Cecil, elder statesman of Britain's most powerful family and cousin to Arthur Balfour, then serving as a Conservative Prime Minister. Lord Alfred Milner, the High Commissioner of South Africa, end quote, also participated on a regular basis, as well as Halford Mackinder, the newly appointed head of London School of Economics. Others involved were Earl Bertrand Russell, as well as Sidney and Beatrice Webb, Fabian socialists and supporters of Mussolini. In other words, the crowd behind H.G. Wells were some of the most powerful empire builders belonging to the upper echelons of secret societies and financial interests. The Bilderberg Group, in fact, was a natural extrapolation of the Coefficients Club. Milner spoke of his vision for the future during a 1903 meeting, over half a century before the Bilderberg Group was founded. At the meeting, Milner stressed the point, quote, "We must have an aristocracy, not of privilege, but of understanding and purpose, or mankind will fail. And here my peculiar difficulty with democracy comes in. If humanity at large is capable of that high education and those creative freedoms our hope demands, much more must its better and more vigorous types be so capable. The solution does not lie in direct confrontation. We can defeat democracy because we understand the workings of the human mind, the mental hinterlands hidden behind the persona. We need constructive imagination working within the vast complex of powerful people, clever people, enterprising people, influential people, amidst whom power is diffused today, to produce the self-conscious, highly selective, open-minded, devoted, aristocratic culture which seems to me to be the next necessary phase in the development of human affairs. I see human progress not as the spontaneous product of crowds or raw minds swayed by elementary needs, but as a natural but elaborate result of intricate human interdependencies, of human energy and curiosity liberated and acting at leisure, of human passion and motives modified and redirected by literature and art," end quote. In other words, educated masses are a horrible idea because they would signify the death of oligarchism. But no, not if you hijack education, higher education, which they have done. And now you can see it in these elections that they're having. All of the, quote, uneducated poor people are voting like unanimously against these Muslims that are running for office. And the liberal educated, college educated people are all voting for the Muslims. It's like they're so fucking brainwashed. They've been educated to a point of no return. Like, I don't think they have two brain cells to rub together. They've just memorized a lot of propaganda and a lot of Marxist ideology, which is strange. But I guess it makes sense if they really want, they want an authoritarian regime, right? Which we essentially have now. But I think the overcorrection is going to be towards communism because we're currently under fascism right now. So I think the commies are going to come in hard and try to take over. And a lot of people are going to go for it because somehow they think that communism has ever worked when it hasn't. All right. Okay. Nations that foster the creative mental developments of their population produce a people which will not tolerate oligarchical forms of rule indefinitely. Illiterate, technologically backward populations will. In fact, one of the reasons for the creation of the science fiction genre had to do with population density. By the middle of the 18th century, the Venetian oligarchy, special interest groups throughout Europe, realized that there was a direct relationship between levels of technological progress and population density. As writer E.N.D. Colvin said in his book, The Unseen Hand in English History, quote, The ruling motive in politics, as intelligent men know very well, is interest. Those resounding cries and plausible principles on which to the young and the innocent the battle appears to be fought are usually pretexts. The flag, the color of action, men, and especially politicians seldom reveal their true motive, but nearly always wrap it in some virtue, faith, or plausible abstraction. End quote. That's what I just said. They're trying to give you the hard sell on this shit and make it sound like it's going to solve all our problems, and it's not. It's just going to make everything 1,000 times worse. Although anyone who understands the deeper implications of the proverbial corridors of power knows that in politics hardly anything happens without unwritten deals over purposeful plans. Yes, often when one speaks of a string puller behind the scenes, great howls of protest arise. Absolutely inimical to the implementation of the Round Table's feudal one-world order was the development of sovereign republican nation-states, committed to the development of their industrial and scientific prowess and to the moral capabilities of their citizenry. Quote, indeed, technological backwardness are contributing causes for the emergence of oligarchical rule. The very existence of the young United States as a federal republic is a demonstration of this point. The average American was culturally and economically superior to the average Briton of the 18th century. Moreover, since nations which did not compete technologically would be strategically inferior, even the states committed to oligarchism, such as Britain, were compelled to adopt from technologically superior France that very same technological progress which they hated to see in French hands. End quote. However, by the turn of the last century, there were large populations, specifically in the technologically robust USA, that could no longer be subverted by an appeal to religious mysticism. As Carl Jung pointed out, a new pseudoscientific basis was needed for cult creation. Enter H.G. Wells. Beginning in 1894, Wells wrote a dozen science fiction novels and over 70 short stories for the Pall Mall Gazette, owned by the Venetian black nobility family, the Astors. This is the same family that years later would sponsor the Austrian painter, along with other leading American and British oligarchs. The most important by far was his War of the Worlds, the still definitive treatment of an invasion of Earth by technologically superior beings, in this case, from Mars. The point of the story is simple. Man is threatened with extermination by an invading superior force. The future is a Dantesque spiral leading us to hell in a handbasket. Man finally defeats Martians, but not through our own creativity and human intelligence, but rather by the natural action of bacteria, itself a lowest of low forms of life. The sponsors of science fiction let their intentions be known. Men were beasts, technology was impotent, and the highest product of the centuries-long struggle of man was to govern his affairs according to the law of progress. The sovereign nation-state was to be replaced by a universal feudalist order. Thus, quote, the essential method of dumbing down of subject population is the vicious suppression of the creative powers of reason, those distinctively human mental capabilities which are expressed typically in the form of valid, axiomatic, revolutionary discoveries in physical science, end quote. With so much at stake, however, more than Wells was needed to transform a vibrant American population with visions of grandeur into a corral filled with docile collections of tamed human cattle. The strategy was simple and effective. Retard creativity in all fields and slow down the rates of economic and scientific progress. Thus, it was in the editorial columns of science fiction magazines that a first critical theory of science fiction was put to the test. Another character heavily involved in molding the minds of the younger towards a specific goal outlined by the oligarchy was an immigrant from Luxembourg, Hugo Gernsback, a fellow of the British Royal Society who emigrated to the United States in 1904. In 1926, Gernsback founded Amazing Stories, itself the first specialist science fiction magazine in America, thus creating the first crop of America's science fiction writers. Through magazines such as Amazing Stories and later Astounding Stories, science fiction, quote, would boldly express what science did not yet dare to affirm or suggest, and even what it would find absurd. It would develop the social, ethical, and metaphysical or purely logical consequences of science, or set out to confirm its ideological assumptions. In such a perspective, the literature of science fiction would be a continuation, albeit purely verbal and conceptual, imaginary and anticipative, of the real scientific work that itself sometimes uses fictions in the form of so-called thought experiments, end quote. The next big hit in the science fiction publishing belonged to an Astounding Stories edited by John W. Campbell. Campbell was a physics graduate of MIT and Duke University and a close associate of U.S. Naval Intelligence operative L. Ron Hubbard. A small-time science fiction writer, would-be occultist, and founder of the cult of Scientology. Virtually every successful U.S. science fiction writer was groomed by Campbell, including Isaac Asimov, Theodore Sturgeon, A.E. Van Vogt, a leading Scientologist, Frank Herbert, as well as a British author, Arthur C. Clarke, in part due to the forcefulness of Campbell's personality, by which he would bend his authors to his own objectives, and in part because he paid more cents per word than anyone else in the business. Campbell's entire stable consisted of authors with a strongly anti-scientific bias of science fiction and its link to the British establishment. For example, one of them was Robert A. Heinlein, an Annapolis graduate and a skilled psychological warfare operative with close ties to naval intelligence that, along with Air Force intelligence, was very close interfaces with the British intelligence services. In 1960, Heinlein was redeployed into the MK-Ultra drug proliferation project, and in 1961, he came out with Stranger in a Strange Land. The theme deals with a Martian boy, Valentine Michael Smith, the son of astronauts, orphaned on Mars after the entire crew died. Quote, Smith was raised in the culture of the Martian natives, being with full control over their minds and bodies. A second expedition to the planet some 20 years later brings Smith home to Earth. Since he is heir to the fortunes of the entire exploration party, which includes several valuable inventions, Smith becomes a political pawn in government struggles. On Earth, he withdraws into a trance-like state of another plane of existence, end quote. In other words, into a state of higher consciousness whenever he is bothered by society. The book became the Bible for the drug culture that was being organized by Gregory Bateson, Ken Kesey, and Timothy Leary. The Beat Writers. I added that at the end. The most famous of the genre's writers is Isaac Asimov. What did I say? Isaac Asimov. A firm believer in Malthus' doctrine of depleting natural resources, a theme he addresses repeatedly in his works such as The Caves of Steel, for example. Asimov was brought in to work with Heinlein at the Naval Experimental Lab during World War II. Asimov's most important work is the Foundation trilogy, about two small elite groups, one specialized in high technology and the other in psychological warfare, quote, who tuck themselves away on a hidden planet and wait for the expected collapse of the galactic empire. The two groups are modeled on Britain's Tavistock Institute and the hidden Aldermaston Labs, from which all scientific research and development on the British Isles is controlled, end quote. Very interesting. One of the few non-American authors in the Campbell stable was a legendary Arthur C. Clarke, a graduate of King's College at Cambridge and a veteran of the Royal Air Force radar program. He was a conscious disciple of H.G. Wells and science fiction mystic Olaf Stapleton. Clarke's best-known work is 2001: A Space Odyssey. The novel's theme of transcendent evolution is attributed to the influence of British author Olaf Stapleton. It describes how all human progress is due to intervention from a superior alien race. Clarke is also the author of the best-selling novel Childhood's End, in which a superior race of aliens called the Overlords invades the Earth, ending all war, helping to form a world government, and turning the planet into a near utopia from the safety of their own spaceships. Decades later, the, quote, overlords show themselves judging humanity and deciding to merge the human race into the, quote, disembodied cosmic vortex, end quote. Which is all a bunch of made up bullshit, okay? It's all made up bullshit. None of it is real. But they've captured the imaginations of so many people that like think it's real and it's possible. None of this fucking shit is real. Carl Sagan and Cosmos. No matter how you look at it, there are only two sides to the UFO debate. You either believe it or you don't. About the only person the mainstream established media trusted to speak of UFOs, astrology, and cults was the late Carl Sagan. No, I don't think so. In 1980, the landmark series Cosmos premiered on public television. Since then, according to the promotional material on the series, quote, it is estimated that more than 1 billion people around the planet have seen it. Cosmos chronicles the evolution of the planet and efforts to find our place in the universe. We're the center of the universe, okay? We're the apple of God's eye. We are not some tiny speck of dust in an insignificant vacuum of space. That is fucking insane, okay? It's not true. Each of the 13 episodes focuses on a specific aspect of the nature of life, consciousness, the universe, and time. Topics include the origin of life on Earth and perhaps elsewhere, the nature of consciousness, and the birth and death of stars. When it first aired, the series catapulted creator and host Carl Sagan to the status of pop culture icon and opened countless minds to the power of science and the possibility of life on other worlds, end quote. There are no other fucking worlds. This is it. This is it. It doesn't take 13 episodes to establish, however, that pure science is not exactly what the series Cosmos is promoting. See? From jumping dolphins choreographed to Wagner's Valkyries, to psychedelic galaxies and futurologist drawings from singing whales and Hindu gods, there is a dialectical change from real science to Sagan's Cosmos, which takes us deep into the world of mysticism. What did I tell y'all like 3 episodes ago? Science is basically ancient Babylonian mysticism. That's all it is. You think it's a scientific method, but 9 out of 10 times they don't even use that shit anymore. They come up with some nutty hoodoo voodoo idea and then try to prove it with their magical math problems. And they do some crazy, insane mathematical equation on the chalkboard, and everybody goes ooh and ah because it's so complex. They could never possibly understand that. That person must really be really smart. It's a fucking math problem on a chalkboard. It doesn't mean fuck all in the physical world, which is what bothers me so bad about people with this gravity bullshit. Things float or don't float, not because of gravity, but because of the density of the air around us and the density of the object itself. Works every time. Helium floats because it's lighter than the oxygen molecule. And also a little side note. Did you know that NASA is the largest consumer of helium on the planet? Why would that be? Think about it. And why do they practice everything in a pool? Think about it. In a place of real science, which has always been an expression of mankind's moral commitment for human progress through mastery of the natural universe, Cosmos proposes an Aquarian, Dionysian version of science based on existentialist, touchy-feely, environmental irrationalism where all involved would participate in a common cosmic consciousness. Hoodoo voodoo, what'd I say? Where did Sagan's people draw the line between a psychedelic experience and quackery? In this sense, Cosmos copies the ideas from Frederick George Younger's The Perfection of Technology, written in 1939. Younger writes, quote, technology fills the air with smoke, pollutes the water, destroys forests and animals. This leads to a condition in which nature must be protected from rational thought, end quote. In other words, what these kooks can't understand about nature must therefore have no explanation, except, of course, if you accept extraterrestrial ramblings as plausible scientific hypothesis. They're a bunch of godless heathens, okay? They don't believe in God. They believe in evolution. Evolution has about as much of a chance of being real as I have of winning the lotto. The essence of science are the methods by which discoveries are made, called the method of hypothesis, which was developed in ancient Greece. Quote, the core of this method is the belief that the laws of the development of the universe are coherent with the human mind's own notion of lawfulness, so that the truth of the universe is fundamentally knowable to man, end quote. Instead, Sagan adopts a consistent form of distortion in order to focus the audience's attention away from the coherence of man's mind. How does he do that? By attempting to break the universe down into a collection of objects, just as Euclid and Aristotle did before him. That's because ideas to Carl Sagan occur in a space devoid of reality. Quote, only thus, in unopposed emptiness, could better elements be joined together in a continuous construction, end quote. But people are not nominalists on this account. Through the coherence of our mind, we know what we have experienced and can identify existences as corresponding to such experiences without needing to break the experience into a collection of names, because our real knowledge is that of our human creative relationship to processes, not things. For all man's science, proclaims Sagan, he is but a speck of dust in the vastness of the cosmos. No, hell we ain't. We're the center of it, baby. God created us in his image and his likeness, and we are the center of the universe. Humanity. Okay, so suddenly we see, quote, Sagan sailing through space, flying in a flying saucer, assuring us that somewhere out in the vastness there exists life, perhaps superior civilization trying to communicate with us, visit us, or perhaps they already have, end quote. And just to make sure we lower humans know our place in the universe, on page 313 of Cosmos, Sagan offers us a computer summary of extraterrestrial civilizations and our place in the great chain of being, end quote. How ridiculous. The barrier is breached between this world and the next. An initiatic rending of the veil of the unknown. Space being seen as the domain of both the dead and the higher spiritual force. Suddenly, the vivid colors of the artist's drawing begin to twist, growing, shrinking, and changing colors like an hallucination of an LSD acid trip. In case the LSD and extraterrestrial do not work, try some Hinduism for a change. Again, let us refer to Cosmos Production for further information. Quote, the Hindu religion is the only one of the world's great religions dedicated to the idea that the cosmos itself undergoes an immense, indeed an infinite number of deaths and rebirths. There is a deep and appealing notion that the universe is but a dream of a God who, after 100 Brahma years, each 8.64 billion years long, dissolved himself into a dreamless sleep. The universe dissolves within him, until after another Brahma century he stirs, recomposes himself, and begins again to dream the great cosmic dream. Meanwhile, elsewhere, where there are an infinite number of universes, each with its own God, dreaming the cosmic dream, end quote. But Sagan doesn't end there. Quote, these profound and lovely images are, I like to imagine, a kind of premonition of modern astronomical ideas. It is by no means clear that the cosmos will continue to expand forever. If there is more matter that we can see, hidden away in black holes, then the universe will hold together gravitationally and partake of a very Indian succession of cycles, expansion followed by contraction, universe upon universe, cosmos without end, end quote. Instead of asking relevant questions that deal with mankind's place in the universe, Sagan takes us on a drug-induced space ride into oblivion. Through the power of television alchemy, Cosmos turned Sagan into a prophet. It is time that someone unmasked the idiocy of what fools had feared as the mighty Wizard of Oz. It is not surprising that this media extravaganza was funded by individuals and organizations closely linked to the same Aquarian conspiracy crazies like the Aspen Institute's Robert O. Anderson, who created the environmentalist movement through institutions such as the Club of Rome, Friends of the Earth, WWF, and the World Watch Institute. The World Wildlife Fund, an organization created by the British royal consort Prince Philip, aggressively portrays wild animals as better human beings compared to humans and modern industrial society. Amongst the people associated with WWF is the internationally renowned director of the Frankfurt Zoo, a man who once said that Earth would be lovable if the human population were no more than 20 million. Wow. These people hate themselves, they hate you, they hate me. They hate all of us, and they want to unalive all of us. But the excitement, the interest, and the attention to real progress in space exploration cannot be killed through kookery, science fiction, budget cuts, or cultural warfare. What in the mind benders at Tavistock don't seem to understand is that the human spirit is far more resilient than their zero-growth environmentalist agendas. We choose to explore space not because it is easy, but because it is hard. This has always been man's destiny. And that was a quote by Kennedy, President Kennedy. And, like, he couldn't have said because it is difficult. He had to say because it is hard. Like, let's try to expand our vocabulary since you're president of the United States, sir. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Sorry. Let me wet my whistle again here. All right. Now, the Cosmos series was funded through a grant to the public broadcasting system of more than $1 million from the Atlantic Richfield Company. Chairman Robert O. Anderson and President Thornton Bradshaw are amongst the most prominent and influential American opponents of scientific, technological, and cultural progress. Since the mid-1960s, the policy faction of which these two are members have been committed to the success of what was known in the 1960s as the Aquarian Conspiracy, the undermining of society through the anti-war, environmentalist, and drug and rock counterculture movements, and is today committed to deindustrializing America to bring us back into the new dark age, the age of scientific rationale, characterized in Marilyn Ferguson's book, The Aquarian Conspiracy, as the age of Pisces will now be cut off by the age of Aquarius. For most of PBS history, funding was provided by AT&T, a CFR company, Archer Daniels Midland, a Trilateral Commission company, PepsiCo, a CFR company whose chief executive officer, Indra Krishnamurti Nuyi, is a Bilderberg and a Trilateral Commission executive committee member, and Smith Barney, a CFR company and one of the world's leading financial institutions. Therefore, you would hardly call PBS a nonprofit, family-oriented enterprise owned and operated by America's public television stations, would you? I certainly wouldn't. What's more, Atlantic Richfield Company, ARCO, Anderson, and Bradshaw have been particularly active in the environmentalist efforts of the Aquarian Conspiracy. Anderson personally funded the first Earth Day in 1970 to the tune of $200,000 to create the grassroots Friends of the Earth movement in opposition to technological progress. Hundreds of millions of dollars went into Earth Day 1970, a vast public relations stunt to get the green movement off the ground. Earth Day was bankrolled by the United Nations, Atlantic Richfield, the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations, and directed by the Colorado-based Aspen Institute of Humanistic Studies, one of the most important planning centers playing a dubious role against technological progress and the destruction of nuclear energy and spawning the environmentalist zero-growth operations. See how they're controlling both sides? Because these industrialists, they're the same fucking people. Both Anderson and Bradshaw are leaders of Aspen Institute for the Humanistic Studies. Aspen created the first anti-nuclear movement and devised the Malthusian environmentalist belief system that science and technology are intrinsically evil inflicted by man on nature. The two ARCO executives are also members of the Exclusive Club of Rome, the leading international institution pushing policies of retrogression in technology and reduction of the world's population by several billions of people. That's schminicide, in case you didn't know. And that's exactly what they're in the process of doing to us right now. They are culling the population. Founded in April 1968 by Alexander King and Aurelio Pecci as a Malthusian organization with an agenda for schminicide, the Club of Rome established a meeting of 30 individuals from 10 countries, consists of the oldest members of the Venetian black nobility of Europe, descendants of the richest and most ancient of all European families who controlled and ran Genoa and Venice in the 12th century. Hold on, the dog wants to go out. Okay, I'll just let her out in the hallway. If she really needs to go out, she'll end up scratching on the door again. Anyways, okay, where were we? In 1972, they published their manifesto on the predicament of mankind under the title Limits to Growth, which showed that Earth could not sustain the current population expansion in the age of depleting natural resources. They're not depleting. Okay, we have infinite resources. God's not going to put us here, create us, tell us to be fruitful and multiply and all that shit without all of the resources that we need. And they are renewable. So, I don't even know, like, they act like God did not create everything perfect the way it was. But they just cannot help but meddle in everything. Okay, so if you break through the Babylonian verbal confusion of their 1992 report, the Global Revolution, a report by the Club of Rome Council, leaves little room for doubt as to their real agenda. Quote, in search for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill, end quote. They concluded with the following, quote, the real enemy then is humanity itself, end quote. I've been shouting for 10 plus years that climate change, global warming, all that, it's fake. None of it is real, okay? They can control the weather. They have the technology to do that and to make it seem like things are happening that are not. That's what propaganda is. That's what this book is all about, and what the purpose of me reading this is all about is to prove to you there are a group of people out here that have been actively trying to control your mind for 100 years, okay? So nothing is out of the realm of possibility here with these nut jobs. In other words, the financial capitalist who launched a Carl Sagan form of college professor with bell-bottom jeans to an intergalactic superstar are the organizers of the same anti-scientific policy Sagan's series Cosmos peddles. Sagan's services were popularized as a part of a willful attempt to eradicate scientific progress because the idea of ceaseless progress in favor of a better future is anathema to the oligarchs behind the curtain. But the weirdness doesn't end there. Sagan was one of the founding members of something called the Planetary Society. According to their own webpage, the Planetary Society, founded in 1980 by Carl Sagan, Bruce Murray, and Louise Friedman, inspires and involves the world's public in space exploration through advocacy projects and education. Today, the Planetary Society is the largest and most influential public space organization group on Earth, dedicated to exploring the solar system and seeking life beyond Earth. The Planetary Society is non-governmental and non-profit and is funded by the support of its members, end quote. Sounds wonderfully promising, except that from the very beginning, the board of advisors included a group of the leading spokesmen for the Aquarian conspiracies, environmentalist, and de-industrialist campaigns of the United States. Among them, Isaac Asimov, the Malthusian science fiction writer, Norman Cousins, editor of the Saturday Review, and member of the Club of Rome, John Gardner, chief of the Environmentalist Common Cause Organization and president of Rockefeller Interfaith Carnegie Corporation, Shirley Huffstedler, who sat on the board of Aspen Institute, and Lewis Thomas, leading advocate of euthanasia. How nice. What's the common theme to their participation? Zero growth, zero progress, idolism of its leading members. And now you've got the likes of Bill Gates going doing TED Talks talking about zero growth. They want zero growth. All right, we're almost done. So I'm going to keep reading past 45 minutes. All right, we're at the next subheader. The extraterrestrial imperative. 30 years ago, space scientist Kraft Eric proved that the alternative to a no-growth policy would lead to a collapse in civilization. Geopolitical politics, power politics, wars over natural resources, waves of epidemics, death-oriented, population stabilization, and extreme poverty, end quote. We are there, bro. We are there. To combat the no-growth policy, Eric developed the concept of extraterrestrial imperative to confront the attack on mankind from the proponents of Malthusian theories of scarcity. And they've been operating on scarcity model for a very long time. Fuel, petroleum, endless. It's like water. It's everywhere. Diamonds, same thing. And diamonds are literally worthless except that they are the hardest and they can cut things. Like, diamonds are, as far as being a precious stone, it's not a precious stone. It's not even a semi-precious stone. But some Jewish family found a bunch of them and then decided that they were going to market them to people. And that's what they did. Through propaganda and mass marketing, they brainwashed all the women to want a diamond for her engagement ring. And so now they are like falsely inflated worth. Like, it's crazy to me. It is absolutely insane to me. Fucking diamonds. And scarcity. And you can look into that, just a little story about the diamond industry and, you know, I know y'all have heard of blood diamonds. Just the whole thing surrounding diamonds it's all BS. I mean, it's all like the scarcity model. They're, you know, acting like, you know, there's a finite amount. No, bro. They're making them in a lab now, so. Okay. The central concept Eric developed is, quote, the distinction between multiplication and growth. End quote. In a 1982 article, Eric stated that, quote, growth, in contrast to multiplication, is the increase in knowledge and wisdom and the capacity to grow in new ways, end quote. It literally turned Club of Rome's genocidal limits to growth reported on its head. Eric pointed out that the Malthusians never considered, quote, space exploration as a domain of man's activity because to them, Earth is a closed system, end quote. See, they know that it's a closed system. They know that we're under a dome, that we cannot get out of here. They know that. And all of the world leaders know that. No, I mean, and people act like, well, how would NASA get away? It's very compartmentalized. Very much like the pyramid on the back of the dollar. The people that are at the very bottom level, it's a need-to-know basis. And as you go up each level, you find out more and more of the secrets. Set up like a secret society. Okay. That's because, as Eric himself wrote in a 1973 article on his mentor Hermann Oberth, quote, the development of an idea of space travel was always the most logical and the most noble consequence of the Renaissance ideal, which again placed man in an organic and active relationship with the surrounding universe, and which perceived in the synthesis of knowledge and capabilities its highest ideas. The concept of limit and impossibility were each relegated to two clearly distinct regions, namely the limit of our present state of knowledge and the impossibility of a process running counter to the well-understood laws of nature, end quote. Countering the anti-science description of the view of the Earth by the Apollo astronauts on their way to the moon as, quote, fragile globe that mankind is destroying, Eric wrote, quote, Earth is not merely a spaceship. It is a member of the sun's convoy traversing the vast ocean of our Milky Way galaxy. Our companion worlds are underdeveloped. Earth is the only luxury passenger liner in a convoy of freighters loaded with resources. These resources are for us to use after Earth has hatched us to the point where we have the intelligence and the means to gain partial independence from our planet, end quote. In the words of Bill Nye the Science Guy, there's no place to go. Indeed, there are whole new worlds for us to explore, about which we know very little. An exploration which would keep us busy for a few hundred generations, and this is exactly what the anti-science platform through Sagan and Aspen and the World Wildlife Federation and H.G. Wells has been trying to avoid at any cost. Now, talking about, going on expeditions and exploration and stuff, there's still plenty to explore. The oceans, for one, and for two, Antarctica. But we're not allowed to go down there. And everybody acts like, oh yeah, you can. My friend went on vacation down there. They went on a cruise, okay, and they got off the boat and they walked to a fake little pole where they said, this is the South Pole. No, it's not. It's a whole fucking bunch of continents down there. Out there, should I say. Okay, and here's our next heading. The coming of the UFOs. We are back to where we started, staring at the doors of perception, enmeshed in a labyrinthine task of connecting the dots. From past chapters, we connected the dots to the involvement of intelligence agents in the field of Egyptian archaeology, to the study of the paranormal OSS operations, psychological warfare, paperclip scientists, JFK assassination, a kind of grab bag of government-approved operations, and would include everything from seances and witchcraft to remote viewing and exotic drugs. And either we agree with JFK prosecutor Jim Garrison that such coincidences are evidence of an intelligence operation, or that the coincidences represent something else, an acausal connecting principle, end quote. To use the phrase invented by Carl Jung, that nonetheless demonstrates important linkages between events in the world. For example, Hungarian-American physicist Theodor von Kármán, a NASA team first tested test rocket in the Arroyo Seco in Pasadena on October 31st, 1936. Sounds more like a ritual to me. October 31st, that's Halloween. October 31st, the night of Halloween, and coincidentally the same day as the last Houdini seance. Those who think that perhaps the first rocket launch on Halloween was simply a coincidence should refer to the official JPL website, where they state that the American space age began on January 31st, 1958, with the launch of the first U.S. satellite, Explorer 1, built and controlled by JPL, end quote. And as Peter Lavanda aptly connects the dots in his underground bestseller, Sinister Forces, quote, January 31st, of course, is the pagan holiday known to Christianity as Candlemas and to pagans as Oimilk. Oimilk? Weird word. Thus, for better or for worse, meaningful or not, the launch that took place on Halloween 1936 culminated in the launch on Candlemas 1958 and was a result of the work of the same organization. For von Karman's Galset team eventually became the founding members of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The man in charge of the Explorer launch was Dr. Werner von Braun, the Nazi scientist formerly of Peenemünde and Nordhausen, end quote. 1947 is a pivotal year in the post-war period. This was the year the CIA was created, and coincidentally, the year that Zionist Israel was about to be created. They were plotting and scheming it. Yes, they were. There is absolutely no coincidence that the CIA was created the year before, or months, should I say, before Britain gave the Zionist Palestine in the Balfour Declaration. That's fucking not coincidence at all. And anybody that is telling you otherwise is full of shit. Alright. Oh, yes. Okay. This was the year the CIA was created, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, and the year Winston Churchill made his famous, quote, Iron Curtain speech, thus declaring the beginning of the Cold War. And that's another thing. This discovery of the quote Dead Sea Scrolls, those are faked. Okay, anything that would have come from the time period that they're claiming that it came from would have been on parchment paper, first of all, and it wasn't. It was on some sort of animal hide that they did a DNA test on and was not even indigenous to that area. Also, the lettering is the modern block Hebrew script, not what they would consider the Paleo-Canaanite Hebrew script. So, the Dead Sea Scrolls were made up to reinforce this idea that these fake people, Eastern Europeans that are called Jays, had any claim to that land, because they fucking don't. They're from Eastern Europe. And the Caucasus Mountains, they are the true Caucasians. Words mean things, people. Okay, anyways. It is the year that the U.S. Navy begins Project Chatter, the search for a viable truth serum, a magic potion to unlock the secrets of the mind. It is the year that the greatest Satanist of the 20th century, Aleister Crowley, died. And if we are to believe the Beatles, it is the year that Sgt. Pepper's band learned to play. It was the year of the famous Roswell, New Mexico UFO crash. More or less than meets the eye, extraterrestrials, spaceships, men in black, visitors from other planets, and the UFO phenomenon disembarked onto the front pages of Americans' newspapers, and in no time, all hell broke loose. I wonder, too, if that was like all a distraction from the BS that was going on over there in the Middle East. You know what I'm saying? Like, just to distract everyone, because at that time, and in time before, didn't nobody fuck with the Jays, bro. That they literally have been kicked out of 109 countries and kingdoms going back through history, because they try to take over the world every single time. But now this time, it seems that unless somebody stops them, they're going to be successful, which means they're going to try to unalive us all. Okay. The 1947 UFO Roswell sighting attracted two men, a former OSS officer, Fred Lee Chrisman, and former FBI Special Agent Guy Bannister, who both would come under suspicion 20 years later for their supporting roles in the Kennedy assassination. Quote, Chrisman and Bannister, two men friendly with a large list of people who later would be a part of the conspiracy to assassinate the president. The odds against this happening must be astronomical. It is the constant appearance of coincidences like these that leave most people apoplectic, speechless with disbelief, and gazing on the world around them with haunted, suspicious expressions, as if reality itself were layered like an onion. A palimpsest on which the numerous events were written over and over each other, all on the same page. Maybe they meant to say a psalmist, but they typoed it. It's Palimpsest. I've never heard of that word before. Anyways, in this case, we have Operation Paperclip, UFOs, and the Kennedy assassination, all written on the same sheet of onion skin parchment. Nazis, aliens, political unalivings. One can almost sympathize with Pontius Pilate, who asked, "What is the truth?" End quote. And the temptation to wash one's hands of the whole matter is almost too strong. One of the accusations leveled at UFO eyewitnesses is that their testimony is tainted by reason of inexperience, lack of professionalism, lack of knowledge of astronomical phenomena, etc. In other words, they are not scientists, military, police, or establishment with credentials. That is the people in charge of determining the contours of our everyday reality. What would happen if you could parade a perfect witness or a series of them in front of the worldwide audience? Would that make a difference in how we perceive the UFO phenomenon? Creating consensus is the next header. I'm trying to read fast. The role of Air Force intelligence is revealed by examining the pattern of recorded major UFO sightings worldwide between 1947 and 1973. Quote, of the 145 U.S. sightings, 54 were claimed by the military, 46 by the Air Force, 6 by the Navy, 1 by the Army, and 1 by the Coast Guard. The modus operandi is clear. A couple of Air Force colonels announce they have seen a flying saucer. This makes headlines, and suggestible people everywhere begin interpreting every flying light they see as a UFO. Such UFOs make headlines in national papers, which leads to more and more stories on UFOs. In case things slow down, a top Air Force official steps forward and announces that he is resigning from the force and will reveal all the information about alien spacecraft that the military has secretly kept hidden. The resignation of Vice Admiral Roscoe Henry Hillenkotter, United States Navy, a decorated war hero and the former director of the CIA, in 1960 is one such case. Hillenkotter quit his job at the National Investigative Committee of Aerial Phenomena, the most prestigious of all UFO investigative groups, within days of a CIA investigation of his proposed role in the opening of the UFO investigation at the congressional level through the Senate Science and Astronautics Committee, with support of senators like Barry Goldwater. Quote, behind the scenes, the high-ranking Air Force officers are soberly concerned about the UFOs, Hillenkotter said. UFO promoter Jacques Vallée described the effects of the UFO hoax in detail in the pages of his Messengers of Deception. Quote, number 1, the belief in UFOs widens the gap between the public and scientific institutions. Number 2, the contactee propaganda undermines the image of human beings as masters of their own destiny. Number 3, attention given to UFO activity promotes the concept of political unification of the planet. Number 4, contactee organizations may become the basis of a new high-demand religion. Number 5, irrational motivations based on faith are spreading hand in hand with the belief in extraterrestrial intervention. And number 6, contactee philosophies often include beliefs in higher races and in totalitarian systems that would eliminate democracy. Strong belief in extraterrestrial intervention could revive this primitive concept, with a particular group claiming privileges peculiar to those who descended from stellar explorers, end quote. Vallée is a close working associate of Professor Ron Bracewell, who, along with MK-Ultra operative John Lilly, astro mystic Carl Sagan, and New York Times science editor Walter Sullivan, author of We Are Not Alone, is a member of the Order of the Dolphin, founded in 1961 to promote the idea of the existence of superior or extraterrestrial civilizations. Another kook who belongs to this set of a group is American astrophysicist Frank Drake, founder of SETI, a group whose primary objective is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence by using the Drake equation, an equation used to estimate the number of detectable extraterrestrial civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. So once again, magical math, nothing to really apply it to. They just make shit up, write a fucking formula on the chalkboard and say, see? We figured it out. Gravity. Here it is. You know? Relativity. E equals mc squared. Okay. And this is the end. There is something enigmatic about asking questions. Questions have a way of framing the future. Through The War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells asked the following, quote, well then, someone may say, if there are globes in the heavens similar to our Earth, do we vie with them over who occupies the better portion of the universe? For if their globes are nobler, we are not the noblest of rational creatures. Then how can all things be for man's sake? How can we be the masters of God's handiwork? End quote. Hold on. Okay, sorry, the dog was scratching at the door again. I promise, we're getting this done to now, okay? Okay, I have to admit these wouldn't have been my questions. I would want to know, quote, how do we change the world? How do we become immortal? End quote. In the late 1950s, scientist Lloyd Berkner, who had accompanied Admiral Richard Byrd on his Antarctic expedition in 1928, stated his vision for the future. And you know us flat earthers love us some Admiral Byrd, okay? Because he proved that there is more land down there. He said the size of the continental United States. So, explain that to me, people. Okay. In the late 1950s, scientist Lloyd Berkner, who had accompanied Admiral Richard Byrd on his Antarctic expedition in 1928, stated his vision for the future. Quote, Science is creative beauty in the highest sense. It provides a systematic and reliable criterion of universal applicability in Plato's search for the harmonious, the beautiful, and the desirable. Truly, the characteristic of civilized man that distinguishes him from all the other creatures is his learning, the ability to utilize knowledge to free himself from the vicissitudes of his environment. End quote. Long before the Club of Rome began a nightmare reality, Berkner anticipated their argument regarding the cost-benefit of space exploration. Each new technology derived from science has a permanence that continues to benefit society indefinitely in the future. Thus, capital, represented by discovery, outlives all other forms. Consequently, the investment in basic research should be written off over an indefinitely long time against the permanent gains acquired by society. End quote. This is not what the oligarchy and Tavistock wanted to hear. In the mid-1960s, the Tavistock Institute's magazine, Human Relations, reported with alarm that the space program was producing an extraordinary number of redundant and supernumerary scientists and engineers. Well, yeah, because they had to be brainwashed into this. Quote, there would soon be 2 scientists for every man, woman, and dog in the society, they warned. Quote, the expanding pool of these scientists and engineers would have a profound impact on the values of American society, from skilled workers to office clerks, end quote, Tavistock reported. Between the late 1950s and late 1960s, people all over the world watched in awe as man conquered space. Spare me. And as Marcia Freeman explains in her great expose on mankind's next 50 years of space exploration, quote, it was not only scientists and engineers and children who by the thousands joined rocket clubs, spending weekends launching amateur rockets, who were infected with the optimism of the Apollo program. In 1962, the editors of Fortune magazine, reflecting the view of the American industry, published a book, The Space Industry, America's Newest Giant, which included a chapter titled, quote, Hitching the Economy to the Infinite, end quote. Quote, there is no end to space, and so far as the U.S. economy is concerned, there will probably be no end to the space program. Man has hitched his wagon to the infinite, and he is unlikely ever to unhitch it again. The space venture, in short, is likely to be more durably stupendous than even its most passionate advocates think it will be. Overall, nothing is more fecund, industrially and socially, than large mobilizations of scientific knowledge and effort, and this is the greatest mobilization of them all, end quote. It's a bunch of people playing fucking pretend is what it is. Our mortal life has a beginning and an inevitable end. What then is our immortal interest in being a person? Can we consider immortality to be an approximation of infinity? Quote, when we generate and transmit discoveries of principle to our children, to those who come later, we live forever in the history of mankind. Our mortal existence is no longer a matter of a beginning and an end. Our mortal existence is a place in eternity from which we radiate the experience of generations before us and radiate our existence into the future, end quote. In a speech in Texas on January 19, 2007, NASA Administrator Mike Griffin gave his view on space exploration, which I really don't give a fuck about, but I'm going to read it for anyways. The real reason we strive to better ourselves is because, quote, we want to leave something behind for the next generation or the generation after that, to show them that we were here, to show them that what we did with our time here. This is the impulse behind cathedrals and pyramids and many, many other things. It is my observation that when we do things for real reasons, we produce our highest achievements, end quote. Okay, I'm going to agree with the astronaut there. And I think that if we spent more time actually focusing on looking at cathedrals and perhaps old historical sites, we might probably learn a little bit more about our history, and like literally everything we've been told is fake and bullshit. Griffin continued, quote, the cathedral builders knew that reason. We look back across 600 or 800 years of time and we are still awed by what they did, end quote. That right there, he said it all right there. Because we cannot build that shit today. He ended by saying, quote, it is my contention that the products of our space program are today's cathedrals. The space program addresses the real reasons why humans do things. And I don't know, the cathedrals were even built by humans, bruh. The cathedrals of the second 50 years of the space age are waiting to be built. This will require nothing less than the philosophical view of mankind which created the cathedrals of centuries past and of the first half century of space exploration, end quote. Against the generalized euphoria of legitimate space exploration and the betterment of mankind against future generations, the Aquarian Dionysian version of science based on existentialist, environmental irrationalism, psychedelic experience, quackery, and common cosmic consciousness stands exposed for what it is. A sophisticated tool designed on one hand to entrap, disorient, and destroy the creative minds of the younger generation who have dangerous illusions that are associated with belief in the idea of technological progress and the spirit of innovation, and on the other to displace man from his rightful place in the universe. The epicenter, which is what I said. We are the center of the universe, okay? Not the sun. We are. Truth always lies in the higher order of processes. True sovereignty lies not in a popular opinion, but in the creative powers of the individual human mind. The only defense we have against the mind benders is to develop our own mental capabilities individually as a firewall against psychological warfare and cultural colonialism. Demons, God, aliens, and us, and so it goes. And that's the end, friend. So if you sat through this little extra long section, I appreciate you. I couldn't do another part. I couldn't do another reading. That was a great book. Anyways, I'm not going to keep you any longer. The dog is standing here looking at me like, bitch, let me out. Anyways, I love you guys. Thank you for being here. And I will see you in the next one. I think next I'm just going to do this little shorty about Fauci because it's so timely, don't you think? Anyways, bye you guys.